Sore loser. Nara sighed, as she stood in front of her brother's room. Ever since his loss to Kiba, he had been held up there and was in a terrible mood, to say the least. And so now here she was. Alright. Time to be a good sister, she told herself, as she knocked on the door. Go away! Ken shouted out. Rolling her eyes, Nara decided to ignore this and enter the room anyway. Ken was laying on his bed, still pouting over his loss. He didn't even turn towards the door when he saw it open. I said go away. Well, I didn't listen, Nara responded. Hearing his sister's voice, he turned to look at her and scowled. Oh, it's you. What, did you come to laugh at me some more? No, I've done enough of that to last me a few days, Nara admitted, leaning against the wall and preparing to have a long, frustrating conversation. Great. One less person laughing at me. Now if all the hundreds of thousands of people who watched that stream could stop laughing, that'd be great. Ken said bitterly. If it makes you feel better, looking at the comments at that video, people are actually pretty impressed with you, Nara admitted. They're impressed that I got knocked around the forest like a rag doll? Ken asked sarcastically. They're impressed you lasted so long against Kiba. She's not exactly someone many people can fight. Let alone as long as you did. Nara explained. She's an OPC for a reason. Yeah, well, so am I, Ken pointed out indignantly. I shouldn't have lost so easily. You lost as 4 arms, so easily. Nara and Ken turned around and saw Izuku entering the room. Ah, Mr. Midoriya. What are you doing here? Nara asked him politely. Well, I came to see if Ken was alright, Izuku explained, closing the door behind him. I'm fine, Ken said curtly, crossing his arms trying to seem tough. I doubt that. Izuku sighed. As I was saying, you only lost to her as 4 arms. You didn't lose to her as a whole. What's that supposed to mean? Ken raised an eyebrow with curiosity. It means you still have 8 other forms, doofus. Nara pointed out. Right. Izuku nodded. 4 arms was probably the worst form you could have used to fight Kiba. 4 arms power is strength, and you were trying to fight someone stronger than you. Remember what happens when you use 4 arms to fight Humungosaur? Nara told him. Ken cringed, as he recalled why he didn't do that anymore. He got literally stomped. Kiba in general is kind of a bad matchup for you. Her main weakness is that she gets weaker the more she uses her strength, but with your time limit it's unlikely you'd be able to get her to a point where you could beat her just by stalling her out. Izuku summarized. Your best course of action would be to take out your opponent as soon as possible, while also making sure you don't get too reckless. Easier said than done, Nara muttered. She knew he was talking about Ken, but this applied to her as well. Izuku nodded in agreement. You're right. It's very hard to both go on the offensive while also remembering to keep your eyes peeled for any tricks and counterattacks. But that's the reason you train. To improve and work on things that you struggle with. The 2 kids thought about that for a moment, realizing how true that statement was. Alright, if 4 arms was a bad match, then who would have been better? Ken asked, thinking about that question himself. Well, I think I'll leave that on to you. Izuku would give him an answer, but the more this kid thought about his forms and how they would work well against his opponent's quirk, the better. Remember, your quirks aren't the most powerful here, but they are the most versatile here. Play your cards right, and you could potentially beat anyone here. And with that, he left, leaving the 2 kids to think about what he told them. While thinking about it, Stinkfly might have been a better choice, Nara told him. But you couldn't have done much damage from the air, meaning you'd have to come down eventually, and that girl could just throw boulders or jump at you, so not exactly a guaranteed victory. If I used Igai, I might have been able to blast her away and keep her from me, Ken speculated. Guess I won't know until I try. And with that, Ken got off his bed and made his way to his door. Where are you going? Nara asked him. Ken turned to her and smirked. I'm gonna challenge that girl to another fight. Let's see how she handles some lasers to the face. And just like that, he was gone. Nara shook her head, but a smile crept its way onto her face. Can't keep that idiot down. I am not sorry. BRRRRR. In the forest, Ken was currently in his Igai form, practicing his aim on some trees. And given that he was mostly eyeballs, he was doing pretty well. BRRRR. Another tree branch was shot off, and Ken quickly celebrated. Ha! I rule. Ken gloated. Yeah, you do seem to have an eye for this, said a voice from the bushes. Ken turned around. Hey, who's eyeing me up? Then, Kay exited the bushes, with an all-too-pleased expression. Sorry, I didn't mean to peep in the cornea. I thought I heard some being excited and wanted to take a look. Kay said, opening up with a pun barrage. Ken squinted, as he immediately knew what was happening. He was being challenged. Challenge accepted. Well, I was just eyelashing these branches off with MI lasers. I didn't blink anyone was gonna see me. Ken responded. I guess I was wrong. Guess everyone has their off gaze. Well, I wink that you should take a break, Kay responded. Maybe have some ice cream. Nah, I am fine. But my throat's a bit dry, so I could use some water. Ken said. Iris, I had a cup of it now. Are you sure all you want is a wink? We have a nice PI waiting back home. And I wink you should give it a glance. Kay said. Brow about you, go ahead and take sight for me, Ken responded. I'll stay here and shoot a view more trees. But I insisted. I have to ask, did you ever eat a pie before? Kay asked him. If you view what you were missing out on, you'd seen up really quickly so you could get some. As the two continued their eye-based pun assault, Moo watched on from behind the trees, trembling. Oh no. Now there's two of them, Moo whispered. I have to warn everyone. Oh no, I'm doing it too. Ken and Kay would eventually stop and return to the house, but Moo quarantined himself for the rest of the day to make sure no one else caught the virus. What is okay? Nara was currently studying in the library, with a large stack of books next to her and a notebook by her side to take notes in. Izuku walked into the library and looked around, seeing that only Nara was present. So he decided to check on her. The girl was too engrossed in her own business to notice, and Izuku managed to pull up a chair and sit next to her without paying any attention to him. He watched her study so intently, it was admirable, but something was wrong. Nara, he said, getting her attention. Ah, Nara jumped in her seat and her head quickly swerved towards Izuku. Mr. Midoriya, please don't do that. Sorry. I wanted to get a closer look at how you studied. Izuku apologized. What are you studying, by the way? Just some math stuff. Nara shrugged. You haven't enrolled us in any schools yet, and I doubt you have the time to homeschool us. Izuku sighed. School could be a bit of a problem once the ages of the kids he had under his care started to vary. He couldn't just give the same lesson to all the children anymore, as the younger ones may not understand it, and the older ones may already know it. So he had to find time to hold separate lessons for some of the kids, in his already tight schedule. Sorry about that. I've been looking at hiring a tutor, but well, my hiring process is a bit slow. Izuku said, simplifying his issues once again. I can see that. Nara was still stunned that this place had no other human employees. But, I want to have a successful future, so I have to work hard, and study. Ah, I see. You are thinking seriously about your future. That's good. Just remember not to overwork yourself, and take breaks regularly. Overworking is bad for your health. Izuku told her, not giving a second thought to how much of a hypocrite he was. Yes sir, although, maybe you should take some of your own advice. Nara gave him a look over and it was easy to see just how incredibly tired he was. I'm fine. But Izuku brushed it off like usual. I have to work hard to keep this place operating. But enough about me, I have a question for you. Why aren't you using your forms to help you study? I imagine XLR8 or gray matter could make this process much faster. Nara gave him a confused look. Isn't that kinda cheating? Everyone back at my old school told me that if I ever tried to use my quirk to help me in school then I would get detention, or worse. Izuku sighed and shook his head. No Nara, it's not cheating. Schools have a tendency to be one way or another. Either they feverishly discourage quirk use or they encourage it past the point where they should. And neither is a good way of handling it. So you mean it should be somewhere in the middle? Nara asked, not sure exactly what Izuku was getting at. It's not really hard to figure out. Let people use their quirks to further themselves, but don't let them use their quirks to hurt or bully others. Izuku stated. It's that simple. But wouldn't that give some people an unfair advantage? Nara argued. While she would have appreciated it if some people were less harsh, she did understand that using gray matter on tests would be a bit unfair to all the other students. Izuku paused for a moment, as he considered his next words. Nara, let me tell you something. I learned when I was 5. Not all men are created equal. The moment Izuku finished that sentence, he got the expected reaction. Nara recoiled back, looking at him with both shock and a bit of confusion. I know, it's horrible, but it's true. Izuku sighed. Some people are born with quirks that put them ahead in life, whereas others, like myself, don't get to have a quirk at all. Nara's eyes got even wider at that revelation, and her mouth dropped. You're quirkless. Izuku nodded. I don't like talking about it much. But yes, I am quirkless. I'm kinda surprised you know about the quirkless. Most kids around your age have never even heard about them. I found out about them while I was doing a paper on the quirk wars, Nara explained, grimacing as she remembered what she read on how the quirkless were treated nowadays. Is it true that the quirkless are treated like Dash? That's not what we're talking about. Izuku cut her off. Although in doing so he inadvertently gave her his answer, causing her eyes to widen in horror. Back to what I was saying, not everyone is born equal. Some people are given advantages because of their quirks and some are given disadvantages. But as someone without a quirk, I don't think other people should have to hold themselves back just to make me look not as bad. Quirks aren't a device or something that can be naturally separated from someone. It's part of you, and asking you not to use them is like asking you not to use your own arm. Nara looked at the Omnitrix and considered what Izuku was saying deeply. Schools, and well society in general, have understandably hard time figuring out how to regulate quirks, Izuku explained, before getting up and gesturing to the room around them. But here is different. I own this house. And I own the land around this house. So what I say, goes. And I say that you are free to use your quirks as you please. In fact, I say you should. The more you get used to your quirk, the more control you'll have over it. Which means eventually you'll be able to reintegrate into society without the government worrying you'll set it on fire. My only request are that you don't hurt yourself, don't hurt anyone outside of sparring, and when you're sparring don't go too far and try to ease up on the property damage. Can you do that? Yes sir, Nara responded. Izuku slumped. Please, just call me Izuku. Suddenly, the door opened and a seer orb floated in and went up to Izuku. He looked into it and frowned. Well, it looks like your brother just destroyed one of the empty rooms. Ugh, idiot. Nara face-bombed. Well, I have to go take care of that. Remember what I told you. Don't hold yourself back. Izuku told her, as he exited the room. Normally, this is where Nara returned to her studies, more determined than ever and willing to use her forms to get ahead. But right now she was a bit more concerned about Izuku. She held great respect for him and what he was doing and admired his work ethic. But at the same time, she questioned his decision to not hire more employees and was worried about the effect that was having on his health. Effects that he was passionately denying, despite them being clear as day. Not to mention she just found out he was quirkless and his unwillingness to talk about it implied very bad things about his past. All signs pointed to something going wrong, and Nara was left wondering if she would need to save someone long before she ever even got into UA.